You're watching CKWS News at Noon on Global Kingston.
Welcome back. While the COVID-19 numbers in the Kingston area may be starting to stabilize, next week students are expected to go back to school. But there are concerns, and some members of the community have called for another lockdown. Here to tell us more ahead of next week's council meeting is Kingston Mayor Brian Patterson. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Erin.
So as a member of the Ontario's Big City Mayors Group, you put a motion forward to the province to reopen schools. So it seems like this is an important topic for you. Why is it so important to open schools in your opinion?
Well, really that discussion came about really from discussions with our medical officer of health here in the KFLNA. So Dr. Oglaza and I speak regularly, and we've spoken about the schools issue because we know it really does have a big effect on our community as a whole. We think of not only kids having to do remote learning, but then also what that does to parents and to families trying to cope with that. And so really out of those discussions, it became clear that there was an overwhelming support, not just from our medical officer of health, but from all medical officers of health across all public health units across the province. And so really once we knew that, we talked about, okay, well, is there a way that as the municipal sector could help to give voice and support to in this case, what our public health experts were advising. And so, the approach that I've taken throughout the pandemic is to align with what our medical officers of health are saying. Try to make sure there's no daylight between us, that we're speaking from the same page with the same messaging. And so based on that was really what drove that discussion among the big city mayors of Ontario, really in support of a number of different healthcare professionals, pediatric experts, and of course our own medical officers of health, to basically add that voice that we saw the effects of the community as a whole, and wanted to make sure that we added our support as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, along similar lines, Global News has spoken to you before about a letter that was sent to City Council in mid-December about a need for a lockdown at the provincial level. Now, what is your opinion on imposing another lockdown?
Well, ultimately, again, I think my best answer to that is that I would defer to the medical experts. And again, our public health officials are themselves saying that yes, some restrictions and measures are necessary, and of course we saw those imposed here in Kingston locally, and then across the provinces as well. But also balancing that against what we know are the negative effects from lockdowns, the isolation, the mental health effects, the effects on businesses and on homes and on families and kids. And so, I think that's really the tightrope that everyone's trying to walk right now. Ultimately, we want to make sure that we have a keen eye on our hospital capacity, ramping up vaccinations to try to reduce the number of severe cases of COVID-19 that would lead to hospitalization. And so I think that, again, my approach is, well, if our medical officers of health are saying these are the recommendations we recommend, then that's something that I'm happy to support. So again, I'm hearing from most, certainly from our local public health folks and from others, that I think what we have in place is the right move for now. Obviously, we'll see how things evolve and how things change. But again, I think that there's also some light at the end of the tunnel here, at least with the current wave, that last week started to hear some cautious optimism about plateauing, and now hearing that we've passed the peak here in Kingston. So I'm hoping that these next couple of weeks will be enough, but we'll be able to get on the other side of this wave before too long.
Here's hoping. And in terms of the weather, it has turned quite cold. We have some initiatives in place to help the unhoused, like the tiny homes around Olympic Harbor, but they aren't occupied yet, and winter is here. The Warming Center doesn't open until 8 p.m., so there's a lot of criticism that maybe it's too late. Could changes be made to accommodate more people earlier on?
Yeah, I think we need to be, perfectly honest that, there are a number of people that are struggling, that the pandemic has really had an effect, and we're seeing a larger population of homeless and vulnerable residents than we've seen in the past. And so, I think that the approach that we've tried to take as a city is work with other agencies and partners to come up with as many different solutions as possible. And so for some people, that's renting a hotel room. For others, it's a space in a shelter, and we've been working hard to expand other emergency shelter spaces. For others, it's for example that overnight warming center, which we've worked hard, and it's been great to see partnership with Lionhearts United Way to get that up and running. The sleeping cabins is a partnership with a relatively new group, our Livable Solutions, which really came forward with this idea, and so we're working with them. I think there's just a few last details that they've had to work through because they're going to be running the program, and obviously they want to make sure that it's successful. But I do unfortunately think that there are still a couple of months of winter ahead of us, some cold weather ahead, and so we're continuing. Right, we've got a number of solutions in place, but we want to do as much as we can. And so if we can get a couple of other solutions and alternatives up and running in the next week or so, I think that that's still absolutely going to help people that are struggling right now.
Okay, well, following on from that, next week's council will get an update on a report from the Housing Task Force. So what are you expecting from that report?
Well, I mean, I've had a chance to glance at the report, and I think that there's certainly some good news to share. I think we all understand that there's a huge need for more housing in the city. And so really what the report is laying out is sort of a bit of a report card about where things are at there. And so the good news is that we're building housing at about double the rate that we used to see even just a few years ago. So twice as many housing units that are being built, not only new housing, but also a big increase in secondary suites where someone might have a home, but they're able to put in an extra housing unit or a tenant. And that, everything counts, right? There's really a goal here to expand all different types of housing in all different types of the city. And so I think that that's positive. At the same time, the Mayor's Task Force on Housing laid out a number of other initiatives and solutions that I think we need to work on to again, make it easier and faster to see more housing built. And so I think some of the things we're going to be looking at are, things like reducing parking requirements, which add a lot of cost to housing. And so anything we can do to reduce that cost. There's a lot of work and upfront studies that have to be done before new housing developments can be built. And so we're looking at ways to be able to reduce that burden as well. So I think that there's still a lot of work to be done on the general housing front. And then when it comes to, how do we provide housing for those that can't afford market rent, that can't afford a home. And we know we've seen big increases in housing prices and rental rates. And so that's where we're making a number of investments as a city in transitional and supportive housing to try to meet that need as well. So I think it's a really comprehensive overview. But again, I think with housing being such a big topic for us, I don't think that you can spend too much time on something like that.
Right, of course. Switching gears now, Council will be discussing the Conversion Therapy Information Program and bylaw. What will the bylaw cover and how will that be enforced?
Yeah, so this will be, I'm sure, a really good discussion at Council on Tuesday as well. So over the last year, we've been working on a municipal bylaw to ban conversion therapy. And the reason why we were looking at that is that at the time, there wasn't a federal ban. There was no federal law. And so we were talking about, okay, what can we do as a community to fill that gap and to help support our LGBTQ community? Now, of course, the landscape has now changed because now we do have a federal law in place. It's a blanket ban on conversion therapy. And so a federal law would trump anything that we would do at a municipal level. So what staff are recommending is instead that we kind of turn our focus to kind of complement that with more support services, good information services, but partnering with a number of really good agencies that we have here in the city to offer support for our LGBT community, information they need, and then also, helping those that might have been victims of conversion therapy. How do we support them as well? So I think that that's, it's a bit of a pivot and a change in direction, and that's what staff are recommending at this point. So again, I think there'll be lots of good discussion around the council table, and again, be able to do what we can as a municipality on this issue.
Okay, well, we have slightly less than 30 seconds, but you'll also be discussing the importance of supporting social enterprises and, for example, the food ecosystem at the Portsmouth Olympic Harbor. So how important are programs like that to support during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that this is actually a really exciting opportunity. Of course, in Ports Olympic Harbor for a number of years, there was a restaurant, the Harbor Restaurant on the second floor, and that restaurant's closed. So now using that kitchen space to empower entrepreneurs to be able to get skills, to be able to start their own businesses with that facility, I think that that's exactly the partnership we're looking for as a city.
Thank you so much, Mayor Brian Patterson.
Thanks very much.